Hello, Hardy 4th grade. Miss Prince here, the week of April 20th. I'm back with another reading ELA video focusing on this week's packet. Your packet this week starts with this page over similes. Now, if you'll remember, a simile is figurative language where you are comparing two things using the words like or as. And then a metaphor is where you compare two things without using the words like or as. In this passage, we are reading the poem, A Hungry Fox. There once was a fox named Jake. His body was as thin as a rake. He wanted some grub, so he found a fat slug and pretended it'd taste it like steak. Like a bump on a log, Jake pondered in a fog, for hours devising a plan, when along came a man in a rusted old truck with a hog. To get some tasty pork to eat with his fork, he moved as swift as an arrow and kept himself small and narrow, and popped open the gate like a cork. The hog squealed in fear and ran off like a deer. Jake's chance was now to capture and eat that sow, but the hog was smart and knew to disappear. Now I'm going to go back through the poem and underline all the similes I can find. There once was a fox named Jake. His body was as thin as a rake. We're comparing a rake and Jake's body. He wanted some grub, so he found a fat slug and pretended it tasted like steak. The slug tasted like steak. Like a bump on a log, Jake pondered in a fog, for hours devising a plan, when along came a man in a rusted old truck with a hog. To get some tasty pork to eat with his fork, he moved as swift as an arrow. So we're saying Jake was fast, swift like an arrow, and kept himself small and narrow, and popped open the gate like a cork. He popped it open like a cork. The hog squealed in fear and ran off like a deer. Jake's chance was now to capture and eat that sow, but the hog was smart and knew how to disappear. Now we have the write about it section. This says, which simile in the poem was your favorite? Why did you like that one the best? My favorite personally was his body was as thin as a rake, because I visualized that in my head and thought it was a funny illustration. His body as thin as a rake. And then I visualized a rake in my head, like a garden rake that you'd rake leaves with Jake's head on it. Isn't that pretty funny? Now let's move over here to the multiple choice questions. Answer the following questions. What is the job of a simile? Is it to compare a noun, to compare two things to each other, to describe a verb, or to add sarcasm to a text? Now remember, we're using the figurative language simile and metaphors, but we're focusing on similes in this passage, to compare two things. What evidence from the text supports the definition of a simile you chose in 1A? So we said we're comparing two things. Now let's look at our options here. So he found a fat slug. Body as thin as a rake. He kept himself small and narrow. Hog squealed in fear. And which of these answer choices are we comparing two things? There's only a slug in A. In B, there's a body and a rake, just like our illustration here. He kept himself small and narrow. Well, small and narrow means the same thing, so we're not comparing two different things there. And then the hog squealed in fear. That's one thing again, just a hog. So our answer again would be B. His body was thin as a rake. We compared Jake's body to the rake. Now I want you to answer 2A, 2B, and 3 on your own. All right, we just finished looking at similes in the first passage you'll be reading this week in your learning packet. Now we're going to take a moment to review main idea and key details. This is something we've already talked about quite a bit. In your packet, you have 3 pages that look like this, with 4 different short reading passages where you have to determine the main idea, what the passage is about, and then a key detail from that passage. We're just going to look at this first one. Oreo pushed her dog paws into the floor. There was no way she was getting a bath. Her master nudged her. Oreo made her body stiff. She was not going to budge. Strong hands came around her belly and picked her up off the floor. No! Oreo had a choice. She could fight this. She could squirm, she could bark, she could shake water into her master's face, or she could let the bath happen. Oreo gave one last whimper, then she let her master get her all clean. Now let's look at our questions. What is the main idea? Oreo is very dirty. Oreo does not like baths. Oreo licks herself clean. Or Oreo is sweet. Let's use process of elimination. So we know Oreo does not lick herself clean. And the passage doesn't really say anything about Oreo being a sweet or naughty dog. We don't know what kind of dog she is. So now let's look at these 2 choices we have left. Oreo is very dirty. That must be true because her owner wants to give her a bath. And Oreo does not like baths. Which of these is the main idea? Our main idea is Oreo does not like baths. That's the main point the author is getting across by telling us the story. The whole story is about how Oreo does not want to take a bath. Now, what is a key detail in the story? Rolls in the mud, shakes water in her face, lets her master clean her, or barks loudly. Let's look back and see what actually happened in the passage. Oreo pushed her dog paws into the floor. There was no way she was getting a bath. Her master nudged her. Oreo made her body stiff. She was not going to budge. That's a key detail. Strong hands came around her belly and picked her up off the floor. No! Oreo had a choice. She could fight this. She could squirm. She could bark. Did she bark? No. She could shake water into her master's face. That's one of our options. Or she could let the bath happen. Oreo gave one last whimper, then she let her master get her all clean. So which of these key details actually happened? Let's mark out the ones that it didn't even mention. It didn't say anything about her rolling in the mud. And then it said she could shake water in her master's face and she could bark loudly, but she didn't do those things. She chose not to and to let her master clean her. So that is a key detail from this story, something that happened to support our main idea. Another strategy you can use for determining main idea is drawing the story or illustrating the story as you read it. So look, see, I have Oreo the dog, our main character. Oreo the dog is pushing her paws into the floor. She does not want to budge. Oreo made her body stiff. She was not going to budge. But then she had to make a choice because her master picked her up. And eventually she let her master give her a bath. So here I have Oreo in the bathtub, even though she is not happy about it. So that's another way that you can also help yourself visualize what's happening in the story as you determine the main idea. I want you to use these strategies for the rest of the passages in this packet. There are 12 total. We just did one together. There's 3 pages and each page has 4 passages on it. They're very short and quick. You can illustrate them, you can underline, you can reread or read out loud. Use whatever strategy you need to determine the main idea and a key detail, a supporting detail from the passage.